Evening, everybody, or morning for some of you. What's going on? How's it going? Welcome. So there's been a lot of content lately. I hope I'm coming through okay. I don't know. I had to switch over to a new, well, not a new, but a another headset that I've been using, and I don't know how clear it's coming through. So if it's not working out great, let me know. Sounded like it might be okay. I'm just gonna adjust a couple things here. Yeah, it looks okay. So yeah, tons of content coming out, mostly from Clubhouse. JRobin and Darth Dawkins have been engaging in quite a few conversations, and this one in particular, Tom Rabbit just posted this one I think yesterday. It's a longer conversation between Roger Smith, who I believe is a grad student in philosophy somewhere, and JRobin, and the conversation is mostly between the two of them from the beginning, and then Darth comes in towards the end, and that's kind of where things go bad. Believe it or not, they go from bad to worse, really. Um, so I'm just going to go over this one. This was kind of weird because a lot of this stuff came out really quick. I'm not going to belabor this too much because there's a lot to cover. So I'm going to get in here and uh, and try to get this thing covered as fast as possible. There were actually two conversations going on, and I heard part of this one early on, and then kind of got caught up with what I think Tom Rabbit's going to be posting as part two of this. Roger and JRobin have a conversation later on. This one, I think, is on. Roger went into one of the worldviews in conflict, Darth Dawkins' rooms, and that's where he's talking. That's pretty much just him, and it's just him and JRobin. And then the second conversation, it looks like it's on one of the atheism club ones, and so it's between JRobin and Roger, and it's sort of being mediated by Jeff Trimble, I believe, another Clubhouse user, and that one is a little bit more heated. And I don't think Darth interjects in that one. I think that's just more or less between the two of them. Although a few other people, Ask Yourself comes in there towards the end. So that one's pretty interesting. I might be reviewing that one as early as tomorrow. I expect that one to drop as Tom Rabbit's part two, unless there's more. If there's one that I missed, maybe the one I'm thinking of is in fact part three or something. So this one, they get into a lot of different philosophical stuff in here as usual. Roger kind of takes JRobin to task on some of this kind of stuff. They go back and forth. So when I saw this kicked up a lot of dopamine for me because there's a lot of weird stuff going on in this one. I agree with Roger for the most part in like what he's presenting, and I have to kind of defer to him if he's a grad student in philosophy on a lot of this stuff because some of it isn't really stuff I'm passingly familiar with, and he's studying it. Um, but what I'm hearing from him, like even the stuff that I'm not totally clear about, I don't find as objectionable as JRobin kind of reacts to this stuff initially, and so things get a little dicey. And Roger in this one, I think, is if anything, he might almost come across as too charitable. He really just is kind of listening to JRobin and Darth later on lay out their points. So, thanks to everybody that has shown up live. I know there's a ton of stuff going on right now. There's a bunch of live things happening. So, thank you all for joining while live. But I don't expect a big audience for this one because well, I think a lot of people watched this when I'm pretty sure Time Rabbit premiered this one, so I think a lot of people have already seen this. But thank you everybody that's in the live chat. I won't go through and name everybody. But Michael Fredgren, I did not forget about you. He was starting to lay out his kind of. He said he had a quick take and analysis on JRobin's argument. So, Michael, if you're going to be around toward the end of this thing, if you want to come in and join me at the if I can get through this thing. I'm going to try to cover as much as I can. But if you want to join me, we can arrange. I can send you a link and we can talk about it if you want, or we could arrange to meet up maybe over on Clubhouse or something like that. If you're not, but if you're not on that, we could do that here. But anyway, uh, Hogtie Champ, I just got here. Start over. Unfortunately, actually, normally I ramble enough at the beginning. I can. I'm going to get running into this one because this one's an hour and actually it's not as long as I thought. It's an hour and 21 minutes, but I think what threw me off is the Darth Dawkins part is just really, really sluggish. And maybe it's just because I'm getting like really bored with him, but Yeah, people have to let me know in the comments if he just comes across as really kind of doddering. I actually think JRobin, I kind of agree with Tom Rabbit on this. I think JRobin is actually getting a little better at arguing this and has kind of excelled past Darth. But for reasons I'm going to point out as we go through it, I think JRobin's take on this and his way of doing this is exposing new vulnerabilities to the argument that weren't as obvious with Darth Dawkins. So, all right, I am going to. And this might get a little glitchy. I don't know why. It looks like StreamYards is showing that I'm having connectivity issues. Weather here's a little weird, so if things bog down or get a little weird, that's me. It's probably not you. So here we go.
I hope you got this for your recording. Hey, YouTube out there. Tom Rabbit likes to record these. Hey, Tom Rabbit.
Hey Roger, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing well. What did you want to talk about?
Really fast, and I know I'm interrupting this already. Why does JRobin sound the most fake at the most basic and general of human exchanges? This is not the first time I've noticed that, and it's to me it's very odd. But it always seems like it's hard for him to just say, "Hey, how you doing?" or "How's it going?"
Oh, we could talk about the agnosticism point again.
Okay, definitely. So let's just make sure that my argument is clear to you.
Okay.
If somebody is affirming a proposition explicitly or implicitly, it makes no difference either way. They're going to be the proposition they're affirming is going to be beholden to the laws of logic. Okay. Namely, in this case, is going to be the law of excluded middle. So when an atheist, or really when anyone operates within the world, they are affirming propositions, okay? And implicit or explicit with those propositions is going to be some metaphysical framework or model of reality, okay? That's foundational. And God is in the category of one such model of reality, meaning that when they affirm a model of reality, it's going to entail either that God exists or that God does not exist, because they're affirming a proposition with respect to the model of reality if they're predicating meaningfully and operating in the world as such.
Okay. So what's the first premise of that argument?
So we're already starting to get into it. I got to say, Xander, how long until they say God does not exist? Because I don't recall that happening in this one. If the second one, if that truly is part two, is what I think it is, oh, he says it in that one, and when he says it, it's quite dramatic, even for JRobin. In this one, I don't know if he ever drops that basic question on him. I don't know if he ever gets that far. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Darth Dawkins does, but I gotta, to be fair, I've watched this all the way through for the most part. I had to stop quite a bit while I was watching this while I was working over the last day or so. And I paused a lot, so especially during the Darth Dawkins portion, because it's just kind of a lift, and yeah, I don't recall the question popping up, which actually says something about that, right? Because like if it's the first thing he opens with, and he's openly hostile, and the fact that he can avoid doing that with this guy means that he's starting off in a different with a different tactic for Roger.
If I were to formalize it, I mean, just off the top of my head, I could just say like I don't know did I say something like, I said something like, if you're like affirming a proposition implicitly or explicitly, or I mean, I don't know if that would really be, well, yeah, it would just be the case that if you're affirming a proposition, that the proposition you're affirming will be beholden to the law of logic, the law of excluded middle.
Okay, so if I'm affirming a proposition, then it is beholden to the classical laws of logic. Sure.
Yes.
What's next step?
Okay. Now, everyone who's predicating is implicitly affirming a proposition with respect to their model of reality or their ultimate metaphysical framework, not like smaller. The way I'm defining metaphysics is somewhat narrow, just like I'm talking about the ultimate nature of reality, not other like smaller metaphysical concepts.
Okay, sure. What's the next step?
Okay. God is one such metaphysic, meaning that then if you just take, so then you could just put it into like modus ponens or something like that. You say if you're affirming a metaphysic, you're affirming something about God, either that he exists or doesn't exist. They're affirming a metaphysic, therefore they're affirming a proposition about God.
Okay, yeah, sorry, that was just a little bit fast. So I'll tell you what I've written down so far. So if you're affirming a proposition, then it is beholden to the classical laws of logic. Everyone who is predicating affirms a proposition vis-a-vis a metaphysical framework, and then God is one such metaphysic. And then after that, you talked a little fast. I didn't have time to write it down. So where do we go after God is one such metaphysical view?
Yeah, I agree, Reckinator. And Space Lord mentioned the key moment. JRobin says when someone affirms a position, that's where the confusion starts. Yeah, this really does kick it off because it seems like the conversation starts to veer into this weird territory where essentially what JRobin is attempting to put out there, and anyone who's better at philosophy than me can like correct me if they think I'm on the wrong track. But the way I'm picking up on this is that he's saying that if I make a statement about a fact in the world, like the grass being green, entailed in that statement, right, is if that statement is true, right, is the reality that the grass is green and all the other entailments about why the grass is green, including the fact that God made the world and all of everything in it, including the green grass that I just, you know, predicated all over. Sorry, whatever I just talked about, right? Whatever fact I just said. The weird thing about this conversation, and this is where I'm having trouble with, is that he seems to think that if a statement, right, like the fact that I'm referring to, right, it's a fact that the grass is green, right? But the fact is an abstract. The grass that I'm talking about, that's a concrete thing that exists independent of me. Ontologically, like there's an entailment there, right? That the grass is dependent upon the ground, the earth, the planet Earth, the solar system, energy in the universe, reality, blah blah. There's lots of things entailed in whatever is necessary to make grass, and whatever allowed grass at that particular point that I'm seeing it to be there in extant in reality, right? Why is what I'm saying entail that too? That seems kind of odd to me. My take on this would be something like, okay, well, if it's entailed in what I say, right, when I say that the grass is green, well, that's a fact, and the entailment of that is that God makes grass green. That's actually not really what's entailed, though, right? The reality of the entailment, ontologically, is that the grass appears green to the visual perceptions of the average human being that observes grass. You know, um, that's part of how we observe the world around us. Is the grass really green, right? What makes a color? You can get into the naturalistic explanation as to why our brains process what we see as grass as appearing to be green, right? And it's based on what our eyes can and also in a way can't do, right? That's predicated on it. Do I need to know that? That is entailed in the reality of why humans see grass as green. Do I need to know that to affirm the fact that grass is green? I don't think I do. I don't see why that's a thing. And so the longer this goes on, it seems like this is just what everything is hanging on to, is that, well, when you affirm a proposition about something, which is just a really weird way of saying, like, look, you're making a statement about something that you think is true about the world. And that's a fact, right? If that's the case, then it entails, if that's accurate, then it entails that God made it. So what? I mean, people have been saying, maybe that is what it entails. Maybe it's not. But what does that do in terms of like my belief or what I claim to know? It doesn't really do much.
If you're affirming a metaphysical framework, you're going to be affirming something about God, as it pertains to whether or not he exists. And then they are affirming a metaphysic, therefore they're affirming something about God,
Okay,
meaning that they can't be agnostic.
got it. So yeah, let me just write it all down there. Okay, got it. Okay, right. So here's my point, and I'm just looking at the structure of it. So let me just read it again back to you, and if anything's being missed, then we could cover that, because I don't want to go down the wrong road. So if you're affirming a proposition, then it is beholden to the classical laws of logic. Everyone who predicates affirms a proposition vis-a-vis a metaphysical framework. God is one such metaphysic. If you're affirming a metaphysical framework as to whether or not he exists, then they are affirming a metaphysical worldview.
Oh,
There,
let me set that right. So that the premise would be if you're affirming a metaphysic, you're going to be affirming something about God. So it'd be like if P then Q. So if you're affirming something about a metaphysic, then you're going to be affirming something about God's existence.
But God is the metaphysic. What if like this whole thing seems to think like you got to start from your metaphysic before you can talk about the small stuff. Like it's like this is some of the strangest apologetics, right? Because there's two different ways of kind of looking at your kind of classic Christian worldview. It could be top down or bottom up, but it always seems to me that JRobin and Darth Dawkins represent an apologetic that talks about God that's more or less like he makes everything real. So it's very top down in a way, right? But then they're inverting it to say no, God is the foundation for all this stuff, and even the tiniest little details of everything are part of God's plan or his energy or his will or whatever. Depending on the apologist, it can get more or less complicated. Um, but yeah, I'm really not like he's like, well, if you're going to invoke, if you're going to what's it reference a metaphysic, then that has something to do with God, right? Like, so I really think for JRobin, I wonder if JRobin thinks like your metaphysic is either has God or doesn't have God, and those are the only two metaphysics allowed. Like, because there's other metaphysical views, I'm sure he would reject them. But the idea that someone is affirming a metaphysic when they say like the grass is green, if they're affirming a metaphysic like Neoplatonism or something like that, I don't see why they couldn't get away with the same kind of assertions that J. Robin's making. I don't think they'd try because I don't think they'd make a lot of sense. I don't think they're particularly convincing, but we'll see.
okay, got it. Sure. Um, Therefore, they can't be neutral and something like this. That seemed to be your conclusion. Okay, fine. So let's just kind of look at the schematics of this kind of argument. So it seems as if what's being said, at least in certain instances, is that you have as your third premise, God is one metaphysical worldview, and then everything seems to be anchored accordingly. So in the second premise, the fourth premise, you say if you are affirming a metaphysical framework as to whether it has to refer to whether or not he exists or something, right? Fine. And I guess what I'm saying is that, at least to me, formally speaking, it's difficult to see how this would be valid. That's the first point. The second point is to say, well, why can't I just say, instead of the third premise, God is one such metaphysics, modal realism is one such So here's how the argument would work. If you're affirming a proposition, then it is beholden to classical laws of logic. Everyone who is predicating affirms a proposition vis-a-vis a metaphysical framework. Modal realism is one such metaphysical framework. If you're affirming a metaphysical framework as to whether or not metaphysical modal realism is true, then you're affirming a position about modal realism. You can't be neutral about modal realism. Is there anything wrong with that argument?
If it's you just by modal realism, you're saying that there are real like
Possible
saying like
worlds.
real categories of possibilities and things like that and impossibilities, like necessities, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no. So possible worlds genuinely exist.
So this is going to be the sticking point for J. Robin, right? Because now Roger's invoking essentially a metaphysic, modal realism, and this is where, I mean, if Space Lord of 75 thought that that the confusion begins at that point, which I agree with, this assertion and entailments business, this is where things really start kind of flying off the rails, because this is where J. Robin is going to have to he's going to have to dig in on this, because I don't think he wants to entertain alternative metaphysics, even though he's been insisting that someone provide him with a metaphysic to defend their quote-unquote atheism or agnosticism or whatever, their absence of a God view. Hogtie says, so much of Didi's argument, and therefore clueless J. Robin's copying of that argument, turns on the intentional confusion of the name God and the word God. Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's not a bad point. Especially if I'm following you right, Hogtie, I think there's quite a bit of this. This is something that I've been complaining about recently with J. Robin stuff, where he's just kind of insisting that this ultimate is the same as the God of the Bible, but that ultimate that he's sort of positing to kind of like and then insisting he's not talking about the God of the Bible, he's just talking about an ultimate, and that's God. That's sort of small g God, God or God with a category name or something like that, you know, the category of a being. And then it's not until later that he actually rolls into the properties that you kind of have to get out of Scripture or something like that. And yeah, or vice versa. Either way, there seems to be a lot of switching between a sort of religion of philosophy concept of an ultimate being God, and then Yahweh slash Jesus.
Yeah, but that wouldn't. So like I'm talking about when I say metaphysics, I'm talking when and the way I'm defining it, I'm saying the nature of possibility, what it means for things to be
Yeah, yeah,
real,
that's what.
what
Yeah,
kinds
modal
of
realism. Yeah, modal realism does that. That's how they quantify over possibility and necessity. It does all the work by supposing that there are like an infinite number of possible worlds and whatnot. So it is a metaphysical view. I'm guessing
no,
what
but
I'm
no, but
saying.
I'm saying like the nature, not I mean, so I'm not like the most familiar with like the terms of modal realism, right? But if you're just gonna say that like just modal realism is just that there are possible worlds that are more than one possible world, then and that's all it says. It doesn't tell anything about the nature of possibility itself. Then I
No,
wouldn't
no, it does.
classify it
It
as a
does.
metaphysics. Okay,
It
then if it
does.
does, then you can't be neutral.
Okay, so are you neutral about modal realism?
No.
Have you studied more? Have you studied modal realism?
If you're just saying like it's about the nature of, I'd have to see what it entails. But if I'm just saying like just
Yeah.
on the
So
face of it,
fair.
if
So
I'm
are
not,
you then?
Oh yeah, this guy is Mr. Delicio. Your way or Yahweh tested by fire. Sorry, I completely forgot about that. To be honest, my bad. Yeah, I think you left a comment on one of my videos. Um, shoot me an email. It's available on my. If you go to my about page or on my YouTube channel, it's jeffersonspatchcock@gmail.com. Shoot me an email if you want to set up a debate. Because I think you wanted to have a discussion with Michael from the Canadian Atheist podcast. Yeah, if you wanted to do that, and you guys want me to moderate, yeah, we can do that. I think I sent you a comment asking because you asked me about debating, and I wasn't sure what you wanted to debate me on. I think you and Michael had talked about debate topics. So yeah, yeah, let me know or contact Michael.
Are you then admitting that you're non-neutral towards something that you've never studied?
yes, you can be non-neutral to things you never studied.
Okay, yeah, but when it comes to something that's as sophisticated as an entire metaphysical framework, whereby there are things that are connecting to other things, and there are accounts of possibility and necessity, and the ontological status of those things that lie therein, doesn't it seem, at least from a prima facie perspective, that in order to make an assessment either way on the veracity of the theory, you must first understand it in its intricacies?
Not necessarily,
So then,
because if you,
why do I have to understand your view then?
well, the point is that if you believe that X is true, then anything that entails not X would just be false. So
No, that's
you don't
no,
have to
yeah.
study every non-X position to know that it's false, as long as you know what it entails, right? So the point is,
But see that's where things start getting a little dangerous to me, right? Because if you start with the assumption, right, then everything that you're doing in terms of your epistemological life as an epistemological agent is active confirmation bias. Because you can start with a metaphysic that this stuff, everything that's happening is the result of what God wants. It's essentially solipsism by proxy. Sure, I'm behaving like a solipsist, but it's not me. Now, I'm an external agent. I was created by this super powerful being, but it acts like it. That's one of the problems with solipsism, right? If you actually are convinced of solipsism, then solipsism has this great tendency of making everything that happens to you affirm the solipsistic view. It's just constantly reaffirming it and proving it to yourself. Um, and essentially that would be the kind of reality that this God would be experiencing if everything is a product of its mind and God is a solipsist. And JRobin, by affirming that this thing is responsible for everything and knows everything, I guess, and is the foundation for everything, he can be comfortable in the fact like, well, the solution to solipsism The problem to hard solipsism is that God is the ultimate hard solipsist, and we are by proxy. But it's no big deal because he's an omniscient solipsist. Maybe that lacks charity, but that's that kind of feels like where JRobin is starting to trend on this part of it, because he's already rejecting a metaphysic that Rogers offered for a reason that doesn't really make sense, right? It seems like he's setting it up like, oh well, no, I don't have to know what that is if I know mine works. Like that doesn't make sense.
Is that I'm not neutral. I wouldn't be neutral in the sense that I'm going to be affirming a proposition that either is going to entail entail that this whatever theory you're talking about is true or is not true. Now I'd have to
Sure.
see exactly. I'd have to now once I'm presented with it, I'd have to see exactly what I disagree with, right? So I could articulate that. But the point is that I'm going to be entailing a proposition as to the truth or the falsity implicitly with respect to the position
Ugh.
that you're putting forward.
Yeah, okay. So before he gets too far into this, I do want to make a point, and thank you, AJ, for this comment because it reminded me of something that occurred to me when I was listening to one of these. He writes, the precepts are correct about the myth of neutrality if you operate under their paradigm. Last I checked, I don't operate under their paradigm, nor am I obligated to. Yeah, there's something to that. So that is a good point, but there is something to be said about this notion of trying to operate under neutrality, because there have been people in this community like with backgrounds in philosophy that have pushed heavy against the whole lack theism thing as they see it, right? The problem that I find with part of that debate is I think it's kind of unnecessary, but well, aspects of it are important. But the one thing that is weird about that is that what I think has happened in the last couple of years is that these guys that show up, the Christians that want to debate this stuff, are showing up with this idea that they've read the definition of what an atheist is according to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and then they don't care about anything else. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is saying, no, it's an attitude on a proposition. Either you believe that God exists or you believe that gods don't exist, right? And that's it. But if you read definitions in philosophical texts about how atheism is defined, that's not all there is to it. That is the definition of atheism when you're approaching it philosophically. If you're approaching because that's the best way for philosophy to handle it, is to deal with it as a proposition, to put it in it's something slightly more binary, because then you can get to something closer to one side being the truth and the other side being false, or at least one being more true than the other, or whatever. But if you're trying to argue philosophically from a position of, say, psychological states, disinclination towards belief, a lack of confidence, these kinds of things, that's stuff that philosophy doesn't do great with, right? So philosophy, for the purposes of philosophy, that commitment to one side of the proposition is necessary. JRobin is treating that commitment philosophically as necessary to live in the world. It's necessary in order to make one's comments intelligible about reality. And I think that is so fundamentally wrong from the jump that if they didn't confuse this, like, I really think that a lot of these guys go to something like the SEP, read a definition like that, and then treat that like it's atheist dogma, and then throw it back in the faces of atheists because they didn't understand what they read, and are basically like, why aren't you living up to this part in the book? Because it's been pointed out to them by skeptics, when skeptics open up the Bible and are like, hey, Christian, hey, believer, how come you're not doing this part? Why is this here? This seems difficult. Why don't you guys believe this anymore? They're tired of answering those kinds of questions. So I think part of this really is about kind of straw-manning philosophy in general, and atheism specifically, and then trying to turn it into this kind of like, it's an equivalent belief system. Like, it has to be, the attitude on the proposition is necessary in order for this to work. Yeah, for purposes of a philosophical debate, yes, that's absolutely true. But that's not all there is to atheism. That's not all there is to belief systems. That's not all there is to people's mindsets. I mean, it certainly doesn't touch on psychology. So where do you go from there? And it doesn't even come close to what we know in terms of like the biological understandings of the brain. So I really think that these guys have kind of confused something here so fundamental with this. and are just trying to weaponize this. And it works because when they get into this kind of thing, it almost makes it sound like, well, it has to be this way or this way because philosophy is the instructions for the universe. That is not how philosophy works.
Right. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, from an a priori perspective, I think that Platonism is true. Platonism of the kind that I subscribe to rules out the presuppositional rule. So I have no reason to investigate your view then, right?
Well, investigation of my view and agnosticism are two different things. So
No.
I
But
can
what I'm
answer
saying,
that.
but you made the specific claim that I don't have to investigate the intricacies of an opposing viewpoint or analyze its strengths because before the fact I have this a priori rejection of the view because I know that this other view is true. And so, sort of what I'm trying to say here is that this seems like a symmetrical situation. You can reject non-natural worldviews because you are a priori convinced to the truthity of the truth of your position, and I'm a priori convinced about the truth of my naturalistic perspective. So it seems as though just as you don't have to investigate the intricacies of my version of Platonism, I don't have to investigate the intricacies of presuppositionalism at all to know that it's false. So it seems like,
Well, I
is
say
that a result
to
that you want?
hold. I would say to hold to the falsity of your position or to hold to the falsity of somebody else. That's perfectly fine. Like that's not like that's fine. Like you don't have to hold. I mean,
This gets kind of weird here. Hogtype writes, yeah, what I mean by the God mix-up is that they believe in necessary God who convinced me he is necessary, which is a God who can be rejected by deduction. But then they insist that this rejection must mean you reject all gods and therefore cannot be agnostic about the existence of gods other than their God. Yeah, that's problematic too. But I mean, there's so many different ways I think that they're just kind of mutilating different aspects of philosophy that it's getting harder to harder whether they're coming, to figure out whether they're coming or going with some of this stuff. But yeah, thanks for that.
you don't have to investigate the intricacies of Christianity to hold a position as to whether or not it's or as to why it's false
Okay. So do you think that
or
when
that is false.
when you think that doctors are in the lab and everything and they're testing alternative types of medications to see which ones are most efficacious, that if the one doctor really thinks that drug A works, they don't have any duty to investigate whether drug B works because they just think that drug A is going to work the best?
No, I would say they do have
Is
it.
that
They
how it
do,
works?
but the thing is that well, no, I'd say they do. First of all,
Oh, so they do.
we're talking about. Well, no, let me make sure it's clear. We're saying that it is on the basis of in virtue of the position that you hold to. I'm not just saying that like you never have to investigate claims. What I'm saying is that you're going to be like affirming the falsity of the negation of whatever proposition you affirm just by virtue of the fact that you're affirming a proposition. Okay.
Okay, well, yeah, let's
So
just.
I'm not saying that you don't have to do investigation,
Oh,
right? Ever. I'm
oh.
saying what I'm saying is that in order for you to hold to the falsity of a position, it doesn't require you to investigate it
Okay, let me ask
because
you
you
two
just be
questions.
implicitly affirming the proposition,
Two
affirming the
questions.
falsity of it.
One, do you sometimes have to investigate positions? You sometimes have to investigate things in order to.
What he was saying there, it does not really make a lot of sense. It just seems like he's sort of kind of justifying his own stance and being able to hold somebody accountable for affirming something that they're not aware of, right? Like you're affirming the entailment of the ontological entailment of whatever it is you're referring to, even though that person might not be aware of that. And given the fact that people have different levels of knowledge, however you're going to try to suss that out for them, what it entails ontologically, which is to say, what it entails in the real world as an actual state of affairs, going all the way back to the beginning of the universe or whatever's fundamental to our, to the universe and to reality. That's different than what somebody is affirming epistemologically, what they're trying to affirm when they're trying to say basic facts. And these guys do this. But I was in a conversation earlier today with Tone Loc, and Michael from the Canadian Atheist had a clubhouse room going, and I jumped in there because Tone Loc was in there, and Tone is a special case. And he was basically, it didn't take him long before he pushed into a bunch of different fallacies, and one of them was he told somebody that he doesn't have the right to refer to facts. He doesn't have the right to facts or something to that effect. and because he believes that, well, this person's denying God, therefore they can't make intelligible sense. They have no right to try to invoke facts when they don't know where anything comes from, right? It's the most simplistic, childish version of what they're trying to put forward, and it's like that does not make sense. It really doesn't. That is literally trying to tell somebody, like, in order for you to, in order for you to know how to drive a car, you have to know how all of it works completely. They reject those analogies, but then they turn around and, one of the dimmer bulbs of the group will say something as blatantly stupid as what Tone said. You don't have a right to facts. You can't know what's real. That kind of stuff, which actually all of them, usually at one time or another, will say something like that.
Produce a more informed opinion about it before rendering it false. Yes or no?
Okay, I think you're asking two different questions. I think you're equivocating a little bit. The first question, or the first issue, is whether or not you can hold to the falsity of a position. The other issue is whether or not you can have an informed position about the falsity of a position. Those are two different things.
Yeah, sure.
All I'm talking about right now is just that what you're going to be affirming is just going to entail the falsity of every position that is negating it.
Exactly.
Whether or not the position you have is
but what position, like, but that's not even a position. What about reality is being negated if you make a statement of fact about the sky being blue? Right? You're negating a worldview that holds that the sky is red. Or any of those other things. Like I really, and again, I don't understand what this is about. Like this just seems to be a way for these guys to conflate entailment, like ontological entailment, with some kind of affirmation when a person asserts a fact about something, right? I really don't know what branch of philosophy, and I don't think that Roger even gets into it. I don't know if he explains it or if he has an issue with it. I'd be interested to know. I don't understand that connection, and I don't understand why, for whatever reason, JRobin and others think that this is somehow necessary. Like, I get that if you make a claim about something, it's different than another mental concept or another statement that you could make. You could obviously make contradictory statements. But if you make a statement about the world around you and you don't understand the origin of the fact that you said, I guess because you could be wrong about it, you probably are wrong about it. You definitely are wrong about it, or you have no right to say it in the first place if you don't know. Like, this shit is poorly defined.
Informed enough.
Why study those other positions then? If it entails the falsity of the positions, why study
because
those
maybe your
positions?
because your position may be internally inconsistent. Your position may be.
Oh, right. So you agree that your position
may have problems.
You agree that your position.
Now this is interesting. JRobin says it could be that your position. Roger doesn't get this. It could be that your position could be internally inconsistent. I think Roger thinks that he's talking about you or your in a theoretical sense. I think Roger's actually meaning your position could be inconsistent, so I have to look at it. Watch what happens next.
May be internally inconsistent then.
My position?
Yeah, because you said your
my position is not internally. My position is perfectly consistent with itself.
But do you acknowledge that it could? Do you acknowledge that there could be an inconsistency that you don't see?
No.
Okay, well then, so it's impossible is it logically impossible for you to be wrong?
About the God's existence? Yes.
Okay.
There you go. Spoken like a true solipsist.
So if it's logically impossible for you to be wrong, you don't need to countenance any arguments to the contrary, then what's the point in discussing it with people that hold very serious positions, academic positions, if I might say, that run counter to your claims? And not only do those academic positions have self-sufficiency, but those people also understand your view and find the claims.
Well, that's a loaded question. That's a loaded question.
Well, I mean, it's a question. It's a loaded question because I think
he is loading it up, but in this case, it's actually kind of important that he is loading it up. Like, okay, why would you even because Roger knows that JRobin is engaging in these conversations on Clubhouse of all places. But if he's so confident that he can't be wrong about his position on God, what the hell is he engaging in this for? Like, JRobin, based on what he's just asserted, would know better than Graham Oppie or Massimo Pigliucci or Lawrence Krauss or any other scientist / philosopher / anybody, regardless of their level of education about anything, right? No matter what they're going to tell him, about their area of expertise and why that might cast doubt on a person's conception of the possibility of a God, couldn't possibly be right from the get-go because JRobin already knows it's false. It's impossible for him to be wrong about the existence of God. So, I mean, the fact that Roger's larding that up a little bit, I think that's important given who JRobin is talking to. That Roger tends to be a little bit, he can be a little bit snobby. He was the one I was talking about, kind of engaging in like a gatekeepy kind of conversation with another person about people not having like, basic, engaging, going on Clubhouse and engaging in these conversations, but never having taken just an introductory level class in metaethics or metaphysics or like, it was a bit far-fetched. But that criticism aside, I kind of like the work that he's doing here, but this really isn't going to work on JRobin.
There's a right answer here.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that their position is self-sufficient. No, definitely not. Not
Well,
the
how do you know if
positions
you've
that
never
deny God's
investigated?
world.
You admitted you never investigated modal realism.
Because I hold that
possibly
I hold that God's essential properties are transcendentally necessary for knowledge, intelligibility, and rationality, etc.
Okay,
And so if
so what you're saying
they
is
hold to
that
a
without
position,
investigating any other view that runs against your position, you could immediately, without studying it, know that it's false.
yes, like for example, the Christian God.
How?
I don't have to study. Like this is not even like complicated, right? You can study, you can have a position on something, and not have studied the other positions, right? I think you're equivocating again.
No, I'm
Now
talking about.
I
I'm
both
talking about.
But this basically makes somebody just like I don't think he says this in this video, but Roger says this to JRobin in another video where he accuses him of being allergic to progress. That's precisely it right there. No, I read this. The only metaphysical claim that I've heard about that I like is this God of the Bible, right? The God of Christianity. And now that I like it, I don't need anything else. Because it actually turns out there's this apologetic written into this that insists that it's true. It asserts it, and I guess that's just how things work now. So, yeah, I mean, I appreciate the radical fundamentalist vigor with which he holds to this, but it is not rational. This is not a rational position, right? I mean, it would be rational if you had some kind of demonstration, I think, of. Well, yep, no, that might be too harsh. It's rational, I think, if he thinks he's getting a reward out of it. I like it. It's right. I'm not looking at anything else because I'm not going to like anything else. That part would be irrational. I take it back. There's aspects to his stance that entail quite a bit of irrationality in them. Even if he's convinced that this is just it. He's actually kind of acting like a curmudgeon at this point. This is the only thing I'm ever going to like, and I'm never going to like anything as well as this, so don't come at me with any of this new bullshit. Right? That does not make sense. That's not rational.
I both
Okay.
I both hold to the falsity, and I also hold to it, have an informed opinion about it, right?
Yeah,
It's also
sure.
that, I've investigated this, of course, I've studied this, I've researched it.
I don't know how informed his opinion is if he's just going to the source that already agrees with it, right? I mean, most people, if they were going to take a look at something, they'd probably investigate both sides, arguments for and against, or they'd look at least things that were critical of, like, if you're looking at the Bible and you're exposed to different seminars, lectures, sermons, or whatever that are insisting on the literal interpretation of the Bible. If you were to go and take a look at it, I'm going to sound like Roger here, go out and take an intro course in either New Testament history or Old Testament history, you're going to get a very different take on the Bible. So I don't know how well informed JRobin's take on this is, especially when I think JRobin is one of those people that would clutch at his pearls if I told him that only 7 of Paul's epistles are actually written by him, and the other ones are either in dispute or almost definitely frauds. If he's not comfortable with that claim in consensus biblical scholarship, I don't think his opinions about his own religion and that God, because a lot of those ideas about that God are coming from Paul, I don't know how well informed that position is.
And so that's just given strength to what I already know.
Yeah.
But
So just
yeah, I mean,
going
like,
back
this
to
is
what I'm sort of asking. Going back to what I'm asking. Look, I think that what the issue is I'll just lay it out instead of doing it dialectically because it'll be a little bit more quick. I think that, and this has been born again and again in the empirical data, that people, when they acquaint themselves with views that are different from their own, there is a veritable tendency to potentially alter positions accordingly. And I guess I would just encourage you in your various endeavors to take a look at some things, like some books that might disagree with you, because I think that would be beneficial, not only for you, because I don't want to necessarily say that you want to go to the other side, but it would help strengthen your arguments. And so before casting away...
Well, you haven't given a rebuttal. You haven't given a rebuttal to my for my argument that you can't be neutral. You haven't given a rebuttal for that. I mean, all you've said is that, I mean, you might find it counterintuitive. That's all. That's the
And here comes Darth.
only defense you've really given.
By rebuttal, are you asking for something that ends in a contradiction?
Something that would just falsify the notion that you can't be neutral towards God, right? Because
Okay.
the premises,
Yeah, sure.
as I've given it to you, it just follows from the premises that if you're affirming something about God, or if you're affirming a metaphysic, that you're following.
I kind of want to listen to that again, because they go through this, I think, in the other one. They kind of lay it out, and I think Roger writes it down. But Josephus Rivera, the thing about it is logic could be wrong, but the God he believes in still exists. It's almost as if he thinks because he knows God exists, all of his arguments must be right. Right, and that's one of the things that I think is really telling about his stance, right? Like, I'm wondering how frequently JRobin hears about the differences between all the Christian denominations about things they do and don't get right? And I think in this case, like if you try to get into like religious claims, he would just narrow it down more and more and more and more and more until the only thing that he can't be wrong about is the existence of God. Right? That's at the end of the day, that's the only thing he's going to have, right? But that's not, and he'll try to keep it as vague as possible. The problem is that his particular God has a lot more baggage with it than just an ultimate that is a mind, even though that's what he wants to present to me. Like, I can't be wrong about the existence of an ultimate that is a mind. Sure you can, right? Let's say that you're not wrong about, like, his leap is it's ultimate, and it's a mind, and it's the God of the Bible, and it died for our sins, and it's going to bring back paradise, and all that good Christian stuff is built into that. The one thing he could be wrong about, even if he can't be wrong about the existence of the ultimate, which is a conscious being, is it could be evil. It could be pissed off. It could be mean. It could be completely negligent of any of its creation, too. It might not give a damn. Like, its energy or essence or whatever might be necessary to keep things spinning, but it might not give a damn how things work out for anyone. All that stuff is just things tacked on by human wishful thinking. So, yeah, that's a good point. And I don't know how he would wrestle with that, other than my guess is, push comes to shove, he is going to default to, God revealed it to me. And he's always truth revealing, so no worries. No lies.
You're affirming something about God in the sense that you're affirming something about the nature of reality, and God is in such a category, and so then you just naturally be affirming whether or not God exists. You're going to be affirming facts either with or without dependence upon God.
Yeah, so I talked about this, I think, the other day with Matt. He's the guy that has like the chihuahua with the sunglasses. Not exactly sure who he is. We had this conversation very much at length, and
he's talking about Matt Yester.
And I guess one of my issues with this, and again, this isn't...
Maybe that's not Matt Yester. I've been known to conflate a couple of Matts on here.
To say that I'm like intransiently stuck in this position, but this is just how things currently seem to me. So when I was presented with the argument, and you can correct me, it's something like this. So we have the law of excluded middle, A or not A, and so those two positions are exhaustive. There's no third option. I agree to that. It's perfectly valid. When Matt Dillahunty says there might be a third option, he's wrong. I agree. Fine. So we have either God exists or it's not the case that God exists. Okay, those are the only two options. One of them has to account for the transcendental laws of logic and whatnot. So I'm just assuming the tag here.
Thank you, Tyler. And TGJ.
One of them has to account for them. But the issue here is sort of like, it just seems like I could cut logical space up in however many ways I want to, pursuant to my ability to formulate a proposition syntactically. So, for instance, I could say either China has committed more war crimes than the United States, or it's not the case that China has committed war crimes in the United States. Those two positions are disjuncts, true disjuncts, if you'd like to say that. Therefore, the prospect of a third of agnosticism is eliminated because of this disjunct. Now, no, there's an option for
No,
you
that's
here.
you're misrepresenting my argument.
Yeah. So again,
What I'm not saying.
Okay.
What I'm not.
So again, I don't know exactly how Roger could have. It sounds like he's on the right track there. So
Not saying is that the mere fact that it's a true dichotomy is going to commit you to the position that there is no God. What I'm saying is that you are affirming a proposition, right? So let's say by when
and I don't even think that's where Roger was going with that. I want to take it back just a couple seconds. I don't want to rewind it too often because this thing's huge.
True disjuncts, if you'd like to say that. Therefore, the prospect of a third of agnosticism is eliminated because of this disjunct. Now, no, there's an option for you.
No, that's
here.
you're misrepresenting my argument.
Yeah. So again,
what I'm not saying.
Okay.
What I'm not saying is that the mere fact that it's a true dichotomy is going to commit you to the position that there is no God. What I'm saying is that you are affirming a proposition, right? So let's say by when I invoke China, I'm going to be affirming something about, its war crimes. Okay, and then also, affirming something about America's war. Well, if I'm doing that implicitly when I'm affirming China or when I'm invoking China, then yes, I'm going to be necessarily entailing that either China has committed more war crimes or human rights violations in the United States, or not, right? But that's not the case every time somebody invokes China. They're just referring a lot of times to maybe the geographical location or the people there or the culture. They're not necessarily invoking something about their war crimes. Okay, the point is that when you're invoking propositions or just operating in the world in general, you will necessarily, if you're actually predicating, be invoking a model of reality, a context within which those facts reside. And if you're affirming a context, right, if you're affirming an ontology, a metaphysic, a worldview
that you're unaware of,
then you're going to be affirming something about whether or not God exists, because God is in such a category where either the facts do depend upon him or they don't. So you're going to be affirming something about God every single time, either implicitly or explicitly, you predicate. Every time. It's inescapable.
Okay, yeah, sure. So let me just kind of abstract back and get to the original dialectical point that I wanted to go to hitherto, because it seemed as if what the original argument was, from what I've heard from Matt and from what I've heard from others, is that we have this disjunct. The disjunct represents two exhaustive positions. There's no third option. And so because of that, this I don't know position isn't mapped onto these two exhaustive options. Therefore, we need to suspend our agnosticism and take some kind of side. I guess what my issue with this kind of
and see, that's kind of what I was talking about when I was talking about clinging to the notion, the definition, the philosophical definition for atheism, that attitude, for the importance of engaging in debates or conversations like this. That's part of the deal. You would be asked to suspend your you've got two people debating this proposition: God exists or God does not exist, right? And regardless of the belief stances of the two individuals involved, they could both be agnostics, but they're going to be suspending their agnosticism for the purposes of debating that out, right? But where this stuff keeps getting screwed up is that JRobin is going on to social media websites, multiple social media websites, Discord or Clubhouse, and is having open public conversations with anybody who wants to join, and he's demanding that atheists defend their atheism, right? Which is a vague concept, because every time you start having a conversation with him, he starts immediately, implicitly, changing what he means by defending atheism. He doesn't want you to defend your belief in atheism or give some reasons for your justifications, right? No reasons for your faith, no justifications for why you think that may be so. He starts immediately kind of dismissing that kind of stuff because he doesn't care about your belief. Now he wants you to falsify his worldview. He wants you to show how God can't exist. The question he should be asking is, God does not exist because. It should be changed to, God, why can't a God exist? And specifically, why can't my God exist, is kind of the challenging question that he's asking. So he's just looking for somebody to take that on. If he really wanted somebody, I think I was talking to my brother about this earlier today, you could have a rational atheist who simply went in there and said, no, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in it. And even if God's real, here's my reason for not believing it. Because according to your God, activities A through Z are not allowed. That's from what I've heard. And I want to do those things. Now, I know those things are forbidden according to your book and according to that God's rules. And I know that that being is real. He's going to send me to hell. But I want to do those things in this life. I don't care if that God's real. I don't care if he sends me to hell. In this life, I'm doing those things. What is irrational about that? Now, I think the only thing that JRobin could appeal to is saying, like, well, if you realized how bad hell is going to be, you'd give up any of this stuff. You'd give up absolutely everything, you know. Which makes me wonder, what would JRobin do if somebody came back from the afterlife and laid out exactly what you had to do? What if you had to live like Doug Forsett in The Good Place, where you're only eating radishes and lentils all day, and you're gluing together a snail that you accidentally stepped on, gluing his shell together, and recycling your urine for water, and he still wasn't going to make it into heaven. Sorry, spoiler for anybody that never watched that show. Watch that show. It's got a better view of the afterlife than JRobin does. But yeah, this idea that he can't find a rational atheist is bullshit. There's plenty of reasons why they can justify their lack of belief. He's looking for somebody to basically prove him wrong, and he really does think here, according to what he's told Roger, he can't be wrong by definition. He cannot be wrong about God, and because he can't be wrong, everyone that doesn't believe in his God, by definition, must be irrational. Which seems kind of odd.
Is twofold. One, and this is what I said before, but I have an addendum to it. That's true for all propositions. I mean, metaphysical propositions syntactically are represented identically to non-metaphysical propositions. So if I had a proposition like either my fan is on the table or it's not the case that my fan is on the table, those are the only two options. You can't be neutral about that. Then we get to this point where you can't be neutral about anything. And if you can't be neutral about anything, then it seems as though you have to know everything. And that seems like a very bizarre conclusion. And so that's just sort of a reductio QED. So that's the first point. The second point is I could see how you could try to save this. One way is sort of what you were hinting at earlier. You could say, well, look, there's some sort of like specialness to metaphysical propositions, even though they're represented logically identically, and there's nothing really to distinguish the two. There's just something special that's not in the syntax, that's maybe in the semantics that distinguishes them. And I say, okay, but now we're going to need some kind of independent argument for that, because now it seems like the bivalence, which you were originally putting forward, isn't really doing the work here. What's doing the work is this is a metaphysical claim. But then it's like, look, there are like an infinity of metaphysical worldviews, right? And to say that I prima facie know the truth or falsity of every single one of them before even lifting up a single page to study them just seems to like violate your duties as an epistemically responsible agent to do a genuine investigation of all the views that are available and then to make an assessment accordingly. You can be very persuaded by a particular argument and then find another book and then be like, wow, I was wrong on that point. And it's that kind of intellectual and epistemic development that is a desideratum if you're interested in, I think, in pursuing the truth.
Fancy word, desideratum.
Okay, well, I think you're misrepresenting me and equivocating just a little bit. So moving backwards to forward, okay, what you just said about knowing that God exists and that everyone would have to know, these propositions, and also about the fact that there are, innumerable metaphysical positions. So first of all, I didn't use the term knowledge here because I don't believe, for example, that atheists know that there is no God. Okay. I don't believe they have justification even for believing that. So I'm not going to classify it as knowledge. What I'm classifying it as is the proposition that they affirm is going to entail something about whether or not God exists. So by that's what I'm saying. There's no neutrality here, that they're going to have to affirm a proposition as to whether or not God exists. Knowledge is not a relevant factor in this discussion.
Okay.
Then this only makes sense, what he's doing right now. He's already backing away from knowledge. So Darth Dawkins has been trying to use an argument similar to this to say that you can't be agnostic, right? For quite a while. JRobin is slowly going through this here with Roger, and now he's saying, no, it's not about agnosticism, whether they know something or not. I'm saying they can't be neutral about something. Neutral in terms of what? Because if you're not, if they're like, oh, well, when they affirm something, they can't be neutral about that. Well, okay, this is where kind of more the Van Tillian style of precept comes out. If JRobin really believed this, then he would know this is the point where a Christian who is getting into precept tells the skeptic, okay, but when you affirm something, you automatically, just in your affirmation, it's affirming an aspect of reality that is dependent upon God, and Christians jump from that assumption, right? Otherwise, you could be affirming something like it's still a flaky kind of argument, right? But they use it as a way of saying, look, you're already doing it's a way of showing that there's only one worldview. Christians and skeptics share the same worldview. That's the whole point of it. Where these guys, like, so I think that this is okay. He can actually kind of build off on this, but what ends up usually happening is he or Tone or some of these other goofballs start talking about how atheists can't make sense of things or can't know facts or can't be right about things. That's, if he's going to say this, I'm not talking about knowledge and then being right or wrong about stuff because they're claiming that they could know that there's no God. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying they can't be neutral when they affirm any kind of position because it's, it entails an ontological worldview. Cool, neat. Then don't tell skeptics and atheists that they can't be right because they're not Christian. That doesn't follow from what he's talking about here.
Okay, let me just dialectically get at that. So agnosticism is the admittance that the person doesn't possess knowledge, right?
It's just, yeah, but I'm not like, so
Yes,
the way
okay,
I verbalize
fine.
the way I
Yeah.
verbalize, well, so like, that's how. So agnosticism, when it was originally coined, it was
By
as
Huxley.
like for knowledge and belief, right? Yeah, by Huxley, right? And so what I'm talking about, I'm just verbalizing agnosticism as a position of neutrality, that they're neither affirming nor denying the proposition, right? So justification here at this point, I'm not really referring to justification. That's just how I'm using the word agnosticism, just to refer to the fact that they're neutral.
Okay, so
And that neutrality directly, like, I hate to use the word entailment in this case, but it directly entails to what they think they can know or what they believe about the world around them if they're stating a fact. Like the whole way of using precept in this sense, like if the Christian and the atheist believe that it's a beautiful day, the Christian will tell the atheist that the atheist has admitted to the existence of God. They really do stuff like this. I had somebody actually do that to me. That's where this ultimately is going. Well, it has to be because everything comes from God, and that's when they get really weird looking in the face, and you got to break eye contact and back away slowly, But yeah, this is really no different than just kind of cult language at this point, and this idea that he's walking back. I'm really not talking about knowledge. Bullshit. I watched this guy rag on these people for not knowing things. It's the reason JRobin does these things, because he goes into these clubhouse rooms and badgers the shit out of people, most of whom are not interested in reading or lengthy discussions of philosophy. They might be interested in having a discussion about belief in general, about their psychological disposition towards beliefs or towards organized religion, things like that. But no, JRobin, what does he do? He fills his hands, both hands, with shit and starts flinging immediately. And then and all of a sudden it turns into this weaponized philosophy horseshit show, and everybody has to figure out, like, they're jumping from foot to foot trying to figure out why this foaming at the mouth lunatic has changed the rules on them all of a sudden. I thought we were just going to talk about, like, the weird church I went to as a kid, or why I think Catholics are kooky or something like that. No, you need to justify, you need to tell me why it is you're wrong about everything, because you atheist can't, you're affirming that a God exists, but you're saying that you're an unbeliever, and I'm trying to point out to you that that's irrational. I'm surprised you can even do your taxes, etc., etc. Fucking nonsense. It's nonsense. It's abusive, emotionally manipulative horseshit disguised as an apologetic, masquerading as philosophy.
So they're neutral, so they don't have knowledge about the particular subject in question.
No,
So
not
so
knowledge. I'm just saying that they don't have their beliefs don't entail something.
no. So what I'm basically saying is that before what you were saying was, look, here's this disjunct. Either God exists or God doesn't exist. You can't be neutral about this, which means that you have to either affirm to the proposition that God doesn't exist, or you affirm to the proposition that God does exist. And those both seem to entail some kind of knowledge claim. Like, I know that God exists, or I don't
Right.
know. Unless you want to say that they can with like suspend judgment and say that they don't know, in which case
Well, no,
agnosticism would be affirmed.
well, no. I actually no. So the thing is that I believe that atheists are arbitrary in the reasoning. So I'm not going to classify their belief
How?
as knowledge, right? I'm not going to classify their beliefs as some sort of justified reasoning that's like non-arbitrary or non-motivated.
But how can it achieve arbitrariness? How would it do that?
I think that their belief in the not God worldview is out of motivated reasoning and their
Oh, here we go.
desire to rebel against God.
Noth-
So I'm not going to
Okay,
class.
but
that has nothing to do. That's just a genetic fallacy, which Roger's going to point out. That is a blatant genetic fallacy and complete and total horseshit. Nothing about that makes any goddamn sense compared to what he said before. Now he's saying the reason that they're arbitrary is because they hate God and they want to just lie to me and tell me that they don't acknowledge that it's real. What happened to that part about not being about knowledge or not being about their belief? Now he's saying, no, 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 no. I don't want to get caught in that particular part, Roger. You kind of clever grad student who I may or may not understand completely. Definitely, he doesn't understand most of what Roger's saying completely. Um, no, no, no. It's not about that. So here I'm going to bring out my big guns. They're annoying poo-poo heads who hate God and are pissed at me for bringing up their anger at God, that they know is real but refuse to acknowledge it, and they lie to me because they're meanie poopy heads. This is where he goes next. Like, for fuck's sake, it started off with a direct entailment about agnosticism, either knowledge or belief, right? You can't be neutral about this stance on God because the things that you say when you affirm a fact, it entails something about the ultimate reality of the world and reality, and that's ultimately God. But now, no, I wasn't saying anything about that, and I don't really care about their belief. I care about the fact that they're shit. I care about the fact that they know God just as well as I do, but they're lying about it. Right? That's his motivation because I've heard him tell him this. At this point, Roger's only going to catch him in the part where he thinks like they're motivated to disbelieve in a God because they don't want it to be true. And even if that's the case, it doesn't follow that our reasoning wouldn't be right. Just because you want something to be true doesn't mean you're wrong if that conclusion turns out to be true.
right,
Justify
just
their
because
belief
it's
as
I mean,
justified.
just because wouldn't it just be the genetic fallacy though to say that because someone's reason is motivating, the reasoning is false?
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that they're not justified. I'm not going to classify it as some sort of justified true belief.
Okay, yeah. Well, I
I'm
mean,
saying
that
that
would
the
still
reasoning
be
is
that would be
arbitrary.
still be a genetic fallacy. Just because motivated, the reason is motivated, it's irrational. I mean, where's the
Roger's going to walk him through some kind of through a pretty good example here, which I'm pretty sure JRobin just pees on.
valid rules of inference that get you to that point? I mean, for instance, let me give you an example. The prosecutor, for instance, let's say so. This is Sedgwick's prosecutor, classic example. The prosecutor is motivated to criminalize the person because he just doesn't like the look of their face or something like that. Okay, but he has bad reasons for doing it, but nonetheless, his arguments are absolutely impeccable, and the jury finds them convincing, and they convict the person. The person actually happened to be guilty. So, is what you're saying
No.
that
That's
because
not what I'm saying.
they had motivated reasons, his arguments were irrational?
No, I'm saying is that they are arbitrarily. So the first thing I said was that they're being arbitrary, right? So for the same reasons that they would reject God, it would be the exact same reasons why they'd have to reject their own position, right? So then what they're left
And I haven't seen that demonstrated. I don't get that.
with is that they just arbitrarily picking, and because they don't want God to exist at that point, the not God position.
It's not arbitrary if we don't want it. That doesn't make sense. Like it's not really arbitrary then. We're not randomly selecting it. It's not arbitrary. It's not completely chaotic. It's either arbitrary or it's motivated, JRobin. You need to pick one of the two and just say it's because we don't want it to be true. But then you can't get to the real meat of the problem. That analogy that Roger gave that's a good analogy to go with. Is that prosecutor unbiased in their prosecution of that particular person? They don't like them, and they want them to be found guilty, and they want them to be punished. And their reason is because they personally dislike them, and they're going to go and they're going to do whatever they can to make sure that person, is prosecuted to the full extent of the law and punished. Turns out they do a good job. They argue it dispassionately. They stick to the facts. The person is found guilty, and the person is in fact guilty of it. So the crime is punished. Justice is served. The motivations of the person that was meting out that justice, who was actively pursuing that prosecution, a little questionable. There's a little bit of personal animosity there. Is that ideal? No. Does that mean that person's wrong? No. So it doesn't matter if you've got this really makes no sense. It wouldn't if that would be like me saying, look, the reason that you're wrong about Christianity is simply because you want it to be true. That's not a reason why they're wrong. That can be a motivation for why they might be disinclined to look at evidence to the contrary for their belief. Any atheist that was trying to tell them, the only reason that you're doing this, the only reason that you're claiming to this is because it's what you want to be true. But there's a difference between that and saying something like pursuing confirmation bias, because that is a little bit like that. But that's not simply about them. That's when motivated reasoning can go off the rails. But this kind of nuance that's necessary for this, JRobin lacks.
They don't want to be held accountable to God. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so
maybe
they have motivated reasons.
Or they, which one is, now he's changing it. They don't want to be held accountable to God. He's assuming that God holds people accountable. There's so much shit loaded into this crap from the beginning. Even if I could believe in a God that doesn't hold anyone accountable, because accountability is irrelevant to that particular God. In fact, my inclination, my belief, based on my upbringing in Christianity, is that that is consistent with the God with those properties. It would not hold people, quote unquote, accountable, and even the Christian God doesn't hold people accountable anymore. That's what Jesus was for. And if you believe in the Christian God, no one is accountable for what they did because Jesus paid the price for their sins. So I don't care about being accountable or not. If this guy's right about Christianity, and I can follow the narrative of Christianity consistently, I'm saved. And I think I'm following that narrative a little bit better than most Christians are. Most Christians act as if they're sinners. You have to affirm this belief, otherwise the salvation's a moot point. I think that's horseshit. I think that's necessary to keep people in the club. I think that's a lie. Now, if I'm wrong and it turns out God's real and it turns out that was a condition, well, won't my face be red? And everything else. Since fires are hot down there.
Reasons, and what's the next step? They have motivated reasons, and that's bad because...
Well, their motivated reasoning is born out of the fact that they don't have a reason for their own atheism. And so they just choose atheism because they want to. It's not because they have a reason.
Is that true for all atheists? Is that true for all atheists?
This is
yeah, well, I mean, definitely all the ones I've talked to, but yes.
Grandma, have you talked to Grandma? Yeah.
No, but so for example, Darth has talked to Grandma. I was there live in the conversation, right? And I'm more than so I would challenge any atheist, PhD or otherwise. I'm not intimidated by their academic prowess, right? Because the Bible makes it very clear that God makes foolish, the wisdom of the world. I'm paraphrasing, but yeah. Has God not made foolish the wisdom of the world? So
no function beer well without. I mean, not a great look, and I'm punching down, but it doesn't look good to stumble on something like that after you tell somebody, in a kind of haughty manner. I'm not intimidated by that. Why would he bring that up? Roger doesn't expect this guy to be intimidated by Graham Oppie's credentials or any of these other people. He didn't bring that up. It wasn't even implied. And JRobin, why should I care? Well, the one thing that you probably ought to actually consider is whether or not that guy with his credentials entailed, and I know JRobin understands this, what's entailed with those credentials is lots of reading. Actual reading of actual books on lots of different subjects in this area, and lots of different people, lots of different viewpoints being entertained. So that person may have a more informed view about what you're talking about than you could. Well, JRobin, has already admitted that that's impossible. He's right about God, and he can't be wrong. I mean, that's the kind of mindset that makes for good suicide bombers. That probably got me demonetized. Sorry for both of those words, folks. Apologies, YouTube.
So that's like, I'm not intimidated by anyone who wants to claim that they're an atheist,
Anyone.
because at the
Okay,
end
no,
of the
no.
day, they don't want God to exist.
At the end of the day, we don't want God to exist. Why would we want that? I might not want the God of Christianity to exist. I don't think that God does exist. I definitely don't want the God of the Old Testament to exist. But how does he know that every atheist doesn't want that to be true? Like, I don't believe in unicorns. I don't not believe in unicorns because I don't want them around. That doesn't follow.
But listen,
Do you know
this is
that?
the point. Yes,
How?
because God's revealed it to be the case.
Okay, he's getting desperate, folks. God's revealed it to be the case. So he knows the minds of other people because God's revealed it to be so. In this case, he can just go running back to like Romans or something. Well, they know the truth, even though Paul wasn't talking about literally everybody, and he wasn't talking about epistemology. He was talking to a specific group of people in his letter to the church in Rome. But he was also talking about cultures that don't really deny a God, right? And the issue that the church in Rome would be faced with is that they are the atheists in Roman culture because they don't acknowledge or worship the Roman pantheon. So, JRobin, not well informed about his belief system.
But
Okay,
like, that's
well,
a different issue. That's a different issue than whether or not you can be neutral towards God, right? This is like
Okay,
Well, actually, no, it's not. God hasn't just revealed this information to JRobin. According to the scriptures, God has revealed this information to all of us. So all of us know this. We all know this. So all of this completely breaks down his argument. No one can be irrational, and no one is wrong at this point. There's just people that lie about things that they don't want to be the case, that they'd rather pretend aren't real, right? His words, his gospel. The fool has said in his heart that there is no God. Blah 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 blah. But Paul turns around and says, "No, all men know, but they seek to suppress the truth with their unrighteousness." Does that change? Do you actually believe the lie? Paul doesn't get into any details on that because I really don't think that's the point of that passage, even though Christians want to turn it into some kind of like magical Christian Freudism. But this stuff. This shit is, and this is where he starts so he's had to retreat from an argument against the possibility of agnosticism to atheists are mean, deliberate liars who just don't want God to exist. To I know, and I'm never wrong about God, and I know all that bullshit that I just said because God revealed it to me. Going great, Jay.
I mean, yeah, this is a different issue. Let me just revert back to the original point. Okay, so the original point seems like we were going down a bunch of different avenues, and I'm just sort of going to summarize the discussion hitherto. So the first point that I made was that if you're going to rely on this disjunct in order to render the conclusion that agnosticism is not a viable position, it seems as though I can't be agnosticism about anything that results from a disjunct. And because of propositions can be formulated in a disjunct by definition, by the classical laws of logic of disjunction introduction, it just naturally follows that any disjunct I can't be agnostic about. So it leads to a kind of Pyrrhonian skepticism. Right. Okay. But then if that's not your argument,
okay, that's a great example, right? Right there. That's not my argument, but it's entailed with your argument, JRobin. Just like you believe when I say the grass is green, it's entailed that God must exist. This is entailed with your argument that no one can be agnostic about any position. Unless you've got an argument to explain how that's not the case. Sucks, don't it, when somebody tries to say, well, just because you don't know that's how it works doesn't mean that's not in fact how it works. Right? I know that JRobin thinks that he's well, I don't know. Well, he does. He thinks that he's onto something here with this. A lot of this stuff is really old, and most of this is just motivated by some really fucked up feelings that this dude has about a lot more than just his religion. There's something going on here that really motivates him to express whatever this is, because it's not spirituality, it's just whatever he thinks his religious identity is, in this kind of combative way, right? I think this is what's happened with the internet, is it's become a sort of like pressure valve for the type of Christians who are young men who want to get involved in something where they can be radicalized and aggressive and obnoxious, and they can feed into this identity of them being a warrior and a protector and a defender of the faith or whatever, and they can go into these kinds of areas and lash out at the rest of the world for not agreeing with them, essentially. I really don't know what JRobin would do if everybody woke up to his realization. If everybody that he talked to just woke up to the realization, no, yeah, you're absolutely right. I do know that there's a God. And you're right, I don't want him to exist. And I'm not going to do what he says, and I'm not going to do what you say. So there's no reason for us to talk about it. And then simply walked away from him. What's he going to do? Is he going to chide them? No. His identity is wrapped up in the fact that he has to prove atheists are wrong. That no one could be right about the conclusion that he's reached, even though I don't think it's a conclusion. He wouldn't say that it's a conclusion he's reached. It's a special revelation that's been granted to him, even though, if he's being honest, if he's being consistent with his theology, it's been granted to everybody. Everybody's been shown the same thing JRobin has, and everybody disagrees on it at least a little bit, and some of us disagree on it a lot. So everything that he's starting from is a position of horse shit. And the only thing that's keeping his little religious inclinations going are the jollies he gets out of coming onto things like this and harping on people and badgering people with this. That's it. This is about JRobin being full of pride, having to prove he's right. And while he's doing it, he's mutilating philosophy, he's bitching up Christianity, he's completely butchering Old Testament and New Testament biblical scholarship, and he's ruining potential interpersonal relationships that might be beneficial to him in the future. At this point, the only thing that he's got a legacy going for is he's like a Charles Dickens villain. Like JRobin and Darth Dawkins are going to be memorized for the legacy of hatred and ill will that they've left behind in their wake. And we never even saw their faces. That's some toxic shit right there. Sorry for that rant, folks.
Then you have to change it from this whole disjunct thing. Because in the beginning, you did say, and it's a recorded conversation, that there was a disjunct and that the disjunct was the important thing. Great. Now we move away from that. Then it seemed like what your next step was to say, like, well, there's just something intrinsically, metaphysically interesting here. And then I say, okay, well, then it's the case that we can't be agnostic about any metaphysical position. And again, this sort of seems to run against what our epistemic duties are as responsible agents, because it seems like in order to accurately assess and determine and come to a belief, we have to seriously weigh the strongest arguments against our positions and see if it illuminates our own position even further or causes us to have a revision of belief. I mean, this is just sort of like what the scientific philosophical method is. But if you're saying that we don't need to do that, then you're sort of running against the grain of the majority of scholarship. So that's one point.
Well, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay, and then the last point, which I think is salient, is to sort of say about this motivated reasoning thing, which is that you were saying, well, look, the atheist or the non-believer or whomever, they have motivated reasons, and those motivated reasons therefore make the result irrational. And it's like I don't even know if that's the case, because we could be unaware of our motivated reasons, right? I mean, you could be unaware that you have a motivated reason to have these kinds of conversations. Does it mean that your arguments are irrational? Probably not. I mean, but if you want to be consistent, you would have to at least concede to the possibility then that your arguments are irrational, and I don't think that you want to do that.
Okay. So I might have misunderstood what you were asking me, like the last time we were talking, but I did make it clear to you, like afterwards, like what I was saying, right? So I wasn't saying that merely because of the fact that there's a disjunct again, right? That therefore ipso facto means that there is a non-neutrality position towards every proposition. If I had made that mistake, I might have misspoken or misunderstood.
But that is the entailment from what Darth has been saying.
What you're asking me, but what I made it clear.
Now, I think the only thing that they can actually get into here is that, like, and this might be where Roger was going. That syntactically, you'd break it down, it would apply to anything that you would stipulate in a proposition, whether you were talking about a metaphysical ultimate or you were talking about something mundane, like a cup of orange juice or something. But in this case, though, I think what he's going to end up having to do is try to say, no, 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 it's slightly different because there's a semantic difference here, right? So syntactical would mean like the structure of the argument, the structure of the propositions, and semantical is going to be, the meaning of the word, of the category of whatever that word is referring to. So, and I think that's where Darth usually leans in on this. Like, if you can be agnostic about all sorts of positions. In fact, I think maybe Darth would go so far as to say you can be agnostic about anything, just not God, because you need God. It's one of these vicious circle things. You are invoking God when you're denying Him. So, there we go. Right? It's a neat way to make sure that your God viewpoint is constantly affirmed and always confirmed.
And I also made it clear that it wasn't something intrinsic about like metaphysics in and of itself that made it, like the propositions that refer to them, any special. What I was saying was that they are affirming something about metaphysics, and by metaphysics, again, I'm defining metaphysics in a very special and specific way. I'm just defining it with reference to like the nature of reality, what it means for things to be true.
I love it when he talks about this. What I mean by metaphysics, what JRobin means by metaphysics is ontology. That's all he's ever talking about. Just everything that is.
The ultimate metaphysical context, right, that all things are going to refer to when it comes to like possibility and the relationships between facts and so on and so forth. And so like small, like what like numbers or whatever, that's not going to be like in this kind of category, right? Platonism is not going to be in that kind of a category. We're talking about the nature of truth, the nature of possibilities and impossibilities.
This just seems like special pleading. Now he's trying to say, no, that's not a metaphysic. But what he's actually doing is saying that, well, Platonism is a metaphysic that I don't think it's up to snuff. That's not up to him. And why would that be up to him? Like this is some brass balls moves here. Like, oh, because I can't be wrong about God and God is the ultimate. Well, it turns out that there must be some kind of tier system of metaphysics, and God is the ultimate metaphysics, and all this other stuff is just piddly, shitty imitation metaphysic. It can't possibly work. But that doesn't track if you're having one of these conversations. If somebody's making claims about the world around them, and you say, but it has to affirm a metaphysic, and it turns out like that's one thing. But if you say it affirms a metaphysic and the only one possible is God, well, now you have a lot more explaining to do, especially if they're like, yeah, sure. This was where Roger started with this. They can just turn around and be like, yeah, I'm affirming a metaphysic. I'm a modal realist. So pound sand. So you compare your metaphysic with my metaphysic, and then you might disagree with it, you might agree with it, whatever. But yeah, I am affirming a metaphysic when I say these things, but it's not the God of the Bible. I don't understand. The only thing JRobin can say about that is that he just doesn't like that, because the consequences, if that metaphysic is true, then his God's not real. And so because he doesn't like that, it can't be the case.
Okay. And when you answer, and that's going to be required, everyone's going to be making a statement about that because they're affirming truth, they're affirming possibilities, they're affirming relationships between facts. And that's only meaningful if you have a reference point for those things. So if you're going to be affirming something with reference to like what those are, then you're going to be affirming something about God, because God is in such a category of a metaphysic as I've defined it, right? That would answer these questions.
Okay.
And so let's be clear. You're affirming a proposition, right? And so if you're affirming a proposition, you're going to be affirming the truth or the falsity of whatever it entails, right? That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that merely because there's a proposition out there.
Right. But what does that do for an atheist? If JRobin's worldview is true, and what I'm affirming ultimately affirms something that is entailed in ontology, where's the connection to what I believe, or what I know, or what I think I know? This goes all the way back to me talking to Darth Dawkins. For me, bringing this issue up with Darth Dawkins when Darth Dawkins would talk about the necessity of referencing the necessity of God, or the necessity of referencing the necessity of referencing God, however he wants to put it. It doesn't make any sense to me why that's the case, because if his worldview is correct, if JRobin's worldview is correct, when I assert a fact, it references God. It entails God. The fact that I turn around and say, yeah, no, I'm not convinced that there is a God, the fact that I don't know it or I'm not aware of it, does not affect that reality if that is truly the actual state of affairs. That's how a presup in a Van Tillian mode would bring that up. Yeah, I understand that you don't think there's a God. I understand that you don't believe and that you're not convinced. But what I'm telling you as a presup is that that entailment exists, and I think that there is some security and there's a certain comfort in knowing that when you assert a fact, it references something fundamental about reality, and as far as we Christians are concerned, that thing is God. Right? It doesn't seem so bad. It just seems like a deepity then. Like that could be coming out of like a kindly Deepak Chopra type. But that's not where the Bonsonites take it. The Bonsonites flip it on its ear and pound it. They're like they send it to military school and toughen it up, right? So now it has to be about, you atheist can't be right about shit. You can't know anything, and everything that comes out of your mouth is nonsense. That doesn't follow from this point. Now, JRobin might end up watching parts of this and say, oh, Jefferson is actually not, he's completely taking my argument in a direction that's not where we go in the conversation. And fair enough, that I don't know that they actually do get that far. But I've seen enough of these conversations, and I've talked to enough people that, like JRobin and in JRobin's orbit, that do take it in that direction. And they don't get corrected by their peers.
And that it's only true or false that you're going to be affirming. I'm saying once you're affirming a proposition, which you are in a metaphysical case, then you're going to be doing this. And it's just true for anything where you're like implying like something either implicit, like when you're making a proposition either implicitly, or you're verbalizing a proposition either implicitly or explicitly. Okay. And so metaphysics would be in such a category where you're going to be.
Yeah, thanks, John Robertson. Yeah, JRobin's take is even a corruption of Bonson's corruption of Van Til. Yeah, it is. But I usually like to lay that crap on Bonson, because Bonson was the one that I think really kind of fueled this, like the school of obnoxious apologism. Apologism? Sorry. I think that's a bad word. Apologetics. Sorry, children.
Be implicitly or explicitly affirming something, but there are plenty of other categories, right, where you could be implicitly saying something, and you're just going to be entailing something, right? And just have to.
Okay, one quick point. Syntactically, as opposed to semantically, could you tell me the difference between one proposition P and another proposition P, without knowing anything about the content? The answer is no, right?
Yeah.
Do you agree that metaphysical propositions are represented as P?
You just mean like they're just like, you mean a metaphysical proposition, like a proposition about a metaphysic?
Yeah, like P or something like that. We can make it predicate or modal. Okay, yeah, sure. Do you agree that non-metaphysical propositions are also represented in a similar fashion?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you agree that I can make disjuncts of both of them?
Yes.
Okay. So in the left-hand case, the one with God, the disjunct denies the possibility of agnosticism, right? But we have something on the right that's logically identical, but
no. So then, no, I don't accept that.
Okay, which part don't you accept?
I'm not saying that the mere existence of the disjunct is makes you non-agnostic. That's not what I'm saying. Like, so this, I keep making this point. That's not my argument.
Okay, so then what?
Right? If that was the impression that I was giving to you, that's not.
So, yeah. Again, that actually does justify the fact that you can't be neutral about it. Is the fact that Darth is saying that agnosticism is possible because of this point. And I'm not sure why JRobin is backpedaling away from that and saying, no, it's not agnosticism. I'm just saying people can't be neutral about it. Yeah, neutral how? When they're talking about it, when they're professing something, when they're stating things they think they know or things they believe. That's belief or knowledge. So they can't be neutral about things they say they know or say they believe, or the entailments of what they say they know and say they believe. Kind of sounds like agnosticism to me, and it sounds like it does hinge on that disjunct.
Not like, so I made this clear. So look, what the point is that you can't be neutral is the fact that you're going to be implicitly affirming a proposition because you're employing a metaphysic.
That you're insisting is being carried forward. It just because a statement entails something on ontology does not mean a person is affirming that thing. This, and if that's the case, you need to really demonstrate what that entailment is. If you're going to hold somebody, you're going to say that somebody is committed to that, you should be able to demonstrate that entailment. Not just assert that, well, of course it entails God because God's responsible for everything. That's just an easy out. Why would, and there's I think there's implications here too about what this would commit people to theologically if they thought that this was true.
Okay. So anytime you are affirming a proposition, look, this is make this clear. Anytime you're affirming a proposition, you're going to be entailing things, right? You're going to, of course, entail the falsity of its negation. Okay. And so that's what I'm saying. We understand that that's the case. Now, what the rebuttal to this would have to be would be either that like God isn't in the category of a metaphysical like framework or something like that, or you're not invoking a proposition, right? Like with reference to God, like you're not invoking a metaphysical proposition.
Wait. It sounds like he's actually, I may have missed this before. It sounds like he's changing it. I thought any proposition that you invoked entailed the existence of God. Now he's saying that you could be invoking something that's not? Is that what he?
Right. That would have to be the respect. Like if you're not invoking a proposition. That would be either that like God isn't in the category of a metaphysical like framework or something like that, or you're not invoking a proposition. Right, like with reference to God, like if you're not invoking a metaphysical proposition, right? That would have to be the response.
Okay, that doesn't make
and so
sense.
the point is that you are affirming a metaphysical proposition every time you predicate.
Okay, so you are doing that. Okay, so it's about agnosticism. It's about either what a person knows, says they know, or thinks they believe.
Do you deny that that's the case?
Yeah, I think I want to go back just a few steps. You said quite a bit. Let me just try to do this dialectically. Okay. So, do you agree that it's either the case that your propositions refer, and I'm just trying to use your language, either your propositions refer to something, I'm going to say ultimate or almighty or however you want to cash that out, or it's the case that they don't?
Yes.
Okay. And then to me, the second thing that you're saying is that it's not the case that your statements don't refer to something ultimate, right?
Right.
Okay, therefore they refer to something ultimate. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Right.
Right.
Or they just make a reference to like something in that category, right? Exactly.
Yeah, sure. Can I give you the formal structure of that argument? So the first premise is A or not A. The second premise is not A, and then the conclusion is
a disjunctive syllogism, right?
Yeah, the issue with this though is that the second premise, not A, through double negation elimination, via natural deduction, reduces to A. So if you do the calculus, which is available, not A becomes A. So the second premise is A, but then hang on, the conclusion is A.
Yeah, I'm not a logician. Like,
right,
I'm
but I mean, if you're going to be
listen,
making these kinds of arguments, if you're going to make it,
well, look, let me just explain this to you. Like, if somebody is affirming a proposition, okay, that means they're going to be like it's going to entail certain things, right? And with reference to your metaphysic, if you're affirming a metaphysical proposition with respect to the metaphysical reality, you will be affirming a proposition with reference to whether or not God does exist or God does not
Okay, so now it sounds like he has changed it.
exist.
Hang on, let's go
Affirming
back,
it's going to be like it's going to entail certain things, right? Okay. Let me just explain this to you. Like if somebody is affirming a proposition, okay?
Any proposition.
that means they're going to be like, it's going to entail certain things, right? And with reference to your metaphysic, if you're affirming a metaphysical proposition with respect to the metaphysical reality, you will be affirming a proposition with reference to whether or not God does exist or God does not exist. Okay, that is the fact of the matter.
That I don't really think that that can be a fact because it can't be demonstrated. In fact, the opposite can be demonstrated. A neutral position on this can be shown.
Now, if you want to dispute that, you can, right?
He has
But if
disputed
that's the
that.
case, then that means they're not neutral in the sense that they're not in a position where they're not entailing the existence or the non-existence of God,
Okay.
because they're
Just a
affirming a
quick
proposition
question.
with reference to God.
So just yes or no, are you interested in the logic?
Definitely.
Okay. So then we're justified in talking about it. So the first premise of your argument is A or not A.
Okay, let's make sure we're clear. What is A? What is not A?
A was sort of what I was taking vociferous notes. A is a statement must refer to the existence of God for its intelligibility, or it's not the case that a statement. And so not A is the negation of that, which is it's not the case that a statement has to refer to God in order to have intelligibility. So A or not A.
Okay.
Okay, fine. So and then it seems to me your second premise is it's not the case that it's not the case that okay, that's just overly technical. The casual way of saying is it's not the case that your statements don't refer to some kind of higher power for intelligibility. That's not the case. So it's a double negation. Okay, fine. And the conclusion is it is the case that your statements refer to some ultimate power in order to achieve intelligibility and ultimacy, right? So
Well, that's not my
that's
argument.
sounding
So
kinda
let's be clear.
trivial.
That's not relevant to agnosticism. This is more like maybe like something like an argument for God's existence, not
right. No, but
agnosticism.
but is this kind of your argument with respect to God's existence at least? I'm trying to get to a point.
Well, I formulate it differently. So I would
Okay,
use
how
like
would you
modus
formulate it?
ponens, like the
Let's go
transcendental
through that.
argument.
Yeah, let's go through that.
Well, like this is totally different from agnosticism, but okay. So like I would say something like
We're having fun.
God
We're
is
having fun.
required. God is transcendentally required for
Oh, I don't know about that, Roger.
knowledge, intelligibility, rationality. Premise one. Premise two is that there exists and we have and we possess knowledge, intelligibility, rationality. Therefore, God exists. God exists.
Okay.
I love how even when they're kind of laying out a relatively simple one, they cannot stop flourishing. Like they can't say it would just, they can't be concise.
Or not, that wouldn't be that wouldn't be so I'd actually no, that would just be transcendental. But like putting into modus ponens, you would say assuming that X has preconditions, if X exists, then the preconditions for X exist. X exists, therefore the preconditions for X exist. X would be God, or sorry, X would be the knowledge, intelligibility, rationality. The precondition would be God. So then the conclusion would therefore be that God exists.
But you haven't argued for the precondition being a god. You've just insisted that it must be a god. So even when within this structure, it's still wanting for that connection is still missing.
Okay. So just so I'm clear, I understood everything that you just said. Are we now willing to cast aside the original formulation of the argument, which is either it's the case that God grounds all intelligibility, or it's not the case that God grounds all intelligibility?
Michael, so did JRobin say that his argument is not relevant to agnosticism? No, I guess his ultimate, where he's left things is that when he's referring to agnosticism, he's just talking about people being neutral about God's existence. So I guess now he has an idiosyncratic view of agnosticism, even though when he's talking about entailments, he's directly talking about how it affects what people claim to know or what they believe. So your guess is as good as mine. He's a confused lad.
It's not the case that God does not ground all intelligibility, therefore God grounds all intelligibility. Are we affirming that argument or rejecting it?
Well, I mean, disjunctive syllogisms are valid, like deductive.
No. Yeah, I'm
So,
just saying. I just want to know whether or not I have your assent to that argument.
yeah, that's not the argument. That's not the argument I'm making.
But
I
do you
could probably
reject?
formulate transcendental reasoning in that.
Notice that any time that he puts these into any kind of logic that can be examined, it's all of a sudden, no matter how close he gets, even if he's spot on, It is always magically not JRobin's argument. It's always missing something. It's always not quite right. But this is the guy that believes he's got the market cornered on total rationality and reasonability. Logic is reflected in the mind of God, and yet these guys are allergic to this shit.
Do you reject that argument?
No, I don't reject it. It's just not how I mean, I'm pretty sure I could
And
formulate.
Darth is starting to talk now. Now I am going to increase the speed on this to see how far I can get into some of this because Darth is just flat out. This is the worst I've seen him in a long time, and I don't mean in terms of like he's not entertaining. He's not like full tilt diva, running screaming, on fire through the dumpster, kind of entertaining. He's just this is like old man penny stories kind of Darth. It's grueling.
Transcendental reasoning in that
Oh,
kind
so
of
you
form,
accept,
where I would say
but
that,
so if you don't reject it, then you accept it.
sure.
Okay, so you do
I mean,
accept.
yeah, it's just
You
either
do
the case
accept
that it's either the case that facts are grounded in God or facts are not grounded in God. It's not the
Okay.
case that facts are not grounded in God. Therefore, facts are grounded
Facts
in
are
God.
grounded in God. Right.
That just kind of seems trivial.
Perfect. Let's talk about this. This is the stuff that I have something at least worthwhile saying about for anyone in the audience that's interested in logic or not. So if you actually write this out, which I encourage everybody to do, you do A, and then you do a little V, and then you do not A, and then the second
Yeah,
premise
A or
is
not A.
right,
Not
and then
not
the
A.
last
Yes,
is A.
Right.
Now, in logic, whenever we have a double negation, the double negation gets eliminated by the rule of double
Right.
negation elimination. So that
Okay,
that
you can
that
stop
premise.
right there. You can stop right
Okay.
there. You're pulling in Alex Malpass. Okay. You know who Alex Malpass is?
So Captain Logic, Lord Supreme, Supreme Commander of all that is reasonable, rational, and logical, the right hand man to Yahweh here, is calling what Roger is illustrating, pulling an Alex Malpass because Darth is only aware of this particular thing because Alex Malpass has explained it to Darth numerous times. Those videos are available, I believe, from a few years back. Most of them were on Discord. It was between conversations between Ask Yourself on Ask Yourself's Discord channel or wherever they were having them, another Discord channel, and Alex Malpass. They went over this. And Darth is very well aware of this. He'll even name drop him. He's well aware of when Alex Malpass pointed out this exact problem with Matt Slick. And Matt Slick, it took him forever to realize what was going on, and then even after he had it explained to him and sort of seemed to get it, doubled back and doubled down on it later on. Like, nope, it wasn't a problem. It just needs to be made different. But it's right. It's right. It's not fallacious. Malpass was trying to tell him, no, this is trivial. You need to fix this. And it's actually kind of a funny video because I think it's from about 3 or 4 years ago. Matt Slick asks Malpass to fix it for him. Malpass, that's not really my job. It's, not my circus, not my monkeys kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm talking to him tomorrow.
Okay, this is what he pulled with Matt Slick. Okay, this is the problem between the modal logic that you're presenting in terms of mathematical formulas, because when we say not God, that can mean more than one thing. Are you aware of that?
Could you maybe explain your point and then I'll
So the answer is no. Does not God, can that only mean one thing, or can it mean more than one thing? Depending on how it is formulated.
Well, my initial pre-theoretical belief is that if it's a double negation of a proposition, then it just means the proposition.
Okay, yeah. This is the problem. People who are thinking in terms of representing certain propositions as mathematical formulas. Okay, because you get.
He's representing it in formal logic, which is supposed to reflect the mind of God, I think. If it doesn't, I would be interested to hear Darth just, formally divorce Christianity from the realms of formal logic, and then we would no longer have to see them enter into these realms. They can go back to doing what they were doing before, appealing to their feelings and visions and subjective experience and faith, which is great because that's an easy way to keep a religion quiet.
Guilty of being a hasty generalization. This happened with Matt Slick and Alex Malpass. Okay. So in the way that Matt Slick was communicating, and I've talked with Matt Slick about this quite a bit afterwards. All right. When we say not God.
When asked for a correct deductive argument to support the belief in God, Malpass said, no, if I knew of a sound deductive argument for God, I would believe in God. That sounds like Alex Malpass. I like this part too. Maya had written, even though Darth understands, Alex still has to call him out on it every time they meet. Yeah, I wonder how much of it Darth really understands, because I don't think he grapples with it for very long. I think he begrudgingly will start to kind of accept some of Alex's points, and then just slides back into this. I mean, he's even saying like, that thing, that you're pulling an Alex Malpass. Like, no, that's just an observation that Alex made about formal logic. So kind of giving him credit. I mean, I'm sure maybe he appreciates the credit, but you might be attributing that to the wrong person, Darth.
We're not. That's a truncated formulation saying the not God world cannot ground the basis of intelligibility. Okay. Okay. So the not God can be understood in two senses. It can be a direct negation of not God. So not God would equal.
If anybody can understand what he's talking about over the course of the next couple of minutes, send me an email and explain it to me, because I have listened to this twice before. I do not understand what he's talking about.
God. Or if we say it in a truncated representation, not God, it could also refer to that not God cannot provide or ground the basis of intelligibility. You understand?
Yeah,
No.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay, so when
I need to go to Roger. Just need to ask Roger, what in the hell is Darth talking about there? Because that is a bunch of gobbledygook.
So when JRobin or people like Matt Slick tried to give a brief syllogistic representation, and somebody like yourself, not accusing you of any deception or anything like that, but if you truncate it to not God, you have to be careful which not God are you referring to. Is it the...
Why does he have to be careful? JRobin is the one making the argument. Roger is attempting to reduce it to something into formal logic so that it can be broken down better. The reason that you do that is so that you can make sure that you're not violating an inference rule. Because remember, those inference rules, laws of logic kind of shit, those things are truth preserving. Darth and JRobin are supposed to give a shit about this. But now all of a sudden, like, oh, hang on there, Captain Philosophy. You can't be just using that stuff willy-nilly on JRobin's on his golden shit over there. You can't do that. You do that, and then you're gonna turn it into some kind of weird math problem. You know, this is rocket science, not brain surgery. You know, like this kind of appeal does not make sense. It should be able to be reduced to formal logic, and it should hold up. The fact that these guys are like allergic to that whole process, like, oh, wait, hang on there, Chief, tells you exactly like they're not on firm grounds when they're doing this. And most of the stuff that they're arguing about isn't really even well-constructed arguments. They're just assertions. They're just making a lot of really boisterous claims about their God, and they know enough about they've been exposed to a little bit of philosophy where they can couch it in some language where it makes them sound like they know their shit. Most of the stuff that they've been exposed to is philosophy secondhand from apologists and ministers and preachers who are maybe kind of inclined to traffic in that language, who use that enough to make themselves sound a little bit better educated than they really are. But ultimately, they're still doing the same thing. They're just assuming that there is no deductive argument. There's no good deductive argument for the existence of God. Alex, thanks, Hogtie, for reminding us that Alex Malpass now has illustrated that fact too. But these guys are basically saying, "Oh, you don't need one. It's just a fact. God is a fact. It's plain as the nose on your face." Okay.
The negation of not God, or does it simply mean that not God cannot X? See the difference?
No.
Yeah. Maybe if you guys could spell it out in the complete detail
When
that
we say
is befitting, that'd be
not
great.
God, when we say in a truncated or in a brief fashion, not God, depending on the context, but in this context, what we're saying is the not God position cannot account for the grounds of intelligibility. It doesn't, the not God, whatever that is, cannot provide for intelligibility. It is not saying not God, whatever that constitutes, does not exist.
Sure. So
this is
like
a problem.
when you asked me,
this is the problem of semantics.
JRobin tries to assert himself back into the conversation that he was hosting, but Darth's here, and JRobin just stays quiet as a mouse.
When certain propositions are translated into mathematical formalizations. A lot of times there's not a problem, but in this case there is a problem. Okay, and if you go back and you listen to the interaction between Matt Slick and Alex Malpass, Matt Slick, was a little bit confused at first, right? But then afterwards, upon contemplation and conversation, he realized the mistake that he was not clarifying, and the same with Alex Malpass. So
Malpass didn't make any mistakes. And if Matt Slick is suggesting that Alex Malpass was making a mistake, he still doesn't understand what went wrong. Malpass just illustrated the same thing that Roger's pointing out. This kind of basic logical problem that he was doing, the triviality of it. And he's like, and he didn't tell him like, hey, you need. He told him that has to be adjusted. You have to fix that because the way that structure works, it's not holding up. So Darth is lying here. Oh, well, they had to acknowledge the mistakes that both sides were making. Both sides did not make mistakes. That's nonsense.
When we say either God or not God can provide the grounds of intelligibility, and we say not God, okay, we're not saying that not God doesn't exist. Okay, so you have to be careful. Jay is not saying not God in the sense that not God doesn't exist.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
Okay, that might be whatever that marbled nonsense is coming out of Darth. Okay, if that's not what he's trying to say, then he needs to construct something different than what he's trying to get at. Because when it gets reduced into formal language, it just becomes trivial. That's Roger's point. And Darth is just like is speeding past it and going into this weird territory like, well, there's a difference in the way we use language, but like, no fucking shit, Darth. You're not the first person to realize that there's a difference between how somebody explains their case in plain English and how they would formalize it in formal logic using, some kind of philosophical training. Of course there's a fucking difference. But the whole point of this is that it should... JRobin, if he wants to traffic in this stuff, should be able to reduce this to something that does hold up in that and doesn't get reduced to triviality. But he doesn't, and he can't, and he knows it, and so does Darth.
Sure.
Although that is his ultimate position.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about
God. And also, and here's the thing, too. This would be less frustrating if these guys would just stick to something religious. If they would just stick to theological claims or stick to appeals to faith or something like this. They walked into this world, and when they deal with somebody who's a grad student in this, and I, at this point I'm getting the impression that Roger is listening to Darth trying to make sure that he doesn't get him wrong. But I get the impression listening to this that the tone in Roger's voice is that he's not exactly sure where any of this is going, and he's wondering what's going to come next. Because I certainly can't. I mean, of all the weird kind of tangential statements that Darth's made, this just seems like you guys talk past this stuff. You guys overcomplicate things. But that's not what JRobin means when he says not God or not God or whatever. Like, neat. Way to come out in defense of your boy. But I hate to put it in Darth's words, but that was a non-informative segue.
God vis-a-vis God, or I should say God versus not God, right? Providing the grounds of intelligibility. Either it is a case that God or not God provides the grounds of intelligibility. If we say not God, that we are not saying God in that formalization. Although it could be interpreted that way in terms of a mathematical representation. That's a truncated form of saying not God does not have the capacity to ground the basis of intelligibility.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. It's like they're trying to make modus tones, but they don't have a Q, only a P, so they substitute not P for a Q. Or something like that. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, if you were to play whatever this is from Darth on a loop, I think by loop 5, it's like a torture tactic. If you played that, it would snap someone's mind.
So when you phrase it that way, it is not a negation that not God doesn't exist. We're just simply saying the not God position cannot ground the basis for principles of intelligibility.
Cool. That makes it trivial. Way to go, Darth. You took all that time to get to the point that it's still trivial.
Okay, so it's more of a conditional formula.
I have a question really quickly for you. I mean, when you asked me if I accepted it, were you asking me if I thought it was valid?
Oh, I was asking if you thought it was a good argument.
Oh, well, I mean, if you're going to formulate it in the way where it just says, God exists, therefore God exists, that's why I told you I didn't use the argument. But my understanding was you asked me at least I was understanding that you were asking me if I thought it was like a valid argument, which of course it is, and you would have to accept that too. But I made it clear to you that I didn't. So like maybe you weren't being clear when you were asking me the question.
Yeah, maybe,
like, because I made it clear that I don't use that as an argument.
Yeah, so let's try to really pin down then what the argument is. To me, it sounds like it's conditional in nature. So it's something like if there's a grounding to logic, then that grounding must be God. There is a grounding to logic, therefore God grounds it. Is that right?
I'm sorry, you said if there's a grounding to logic?
Jesus Christ. Like, okay, at this point, despite what they've been through, Roger is literally trying to help JRobin come up with better arguments for his position. While JRobin has kind of ragged on him a couple of times about not answering his questions and not defending his position, whether it holds that he's agnostic or atheist. And JRobin, I don't even think at that point gave him the courtesy of listening to that formulation. So that
Yeah,
or I mean, or you could put P for something else. Like if statements are in fact, if we can make intelligible statements, then God secures that fact. We can make intelligible statements, therefore God secures that fact.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so that's sort of more what you're saying.
Right, it's just transcendental argumentation.
Okay, so
that's not transcendental argumentation. Oh my God, I don't really have to go off on that any more than I think I already have.
So we're moving away from the disjunct now. So I guess this is a little bit more clear then. So let's just go through each of the premises, and maybe you could give me.
And this is one thing I'll say at this particular point, because I'm probably gonna have to wrap this up and maybe continue this on in the morning. I was hoping I'd get through the whole thing, but I probably won't, because the rest. They're getting to the point now where Darth is going to fully take over. I forgot there was this little interlude. Darth is going to fully take over. And really just start kind of like badgering Roger towards the end. So I kind of want to get into that because he just, I mean, he kind of tortures the hell out of the kid. But I think at this point, I think there were things about this, and this was, I might be projecting a little bit too much onto this, but I heard Roger telling this in a conversation, and I disliked it quite a bit, because he was basically saying that he preferred most of the positions he was hearing from theists on Clubhouse rather than the atheists, because, and this was what I complained about before, it sounded like the Christians or the theists were at least familiar with people like Plantinga or Swinburne or whoever, and so at least they're kind of familiar with this kind of stuff, right? But I really do feel, but he's quick to point out like small mistakes. My guess is if you got this guy into a position and he was dealing with somebody that he really didn't like, he would be merciless and he would really pick them apart. I get the impression here that he's pulling a lot of punches, because I think he has a kind of a vested interest in saying, like, well, I think these people are interested in this philosophy, and I'm going to help them come up with better arguments and realize the folly of their ways. They can construct better arguments. They can get a better appreciation for philosophy. I really think that's wrong-headed, because JRobin might care a tiny bit. Darth definitely does not give a fuck. He does not give a shit about this. And so I think Roger is completely sailing down the wrong road. And the part 2 of this, which I think Spooky actually just mentioned it in the live chat a little bit ago, it looks like part 2 was dropped by Tom Rabbit. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to end this particular point here. I wish I could have finished this, but this, like I said, this is a huge video. I might get into the rest of this one tomorrow and kind of get through it. The second part, if it's on Tom Rabbit now, if you haven't had an opportunity to watch it, definitely give that, definitely check that out if you can. Watch some of that. If it really is, actually, I might as well just take a look and see for myself if that's where things are. Let's see where am I at on this. Oof, only made it 47 minutes in. That's not good. Yeah, part 2. Okay, let's take a look.
It's called a kill screen because basically there's no way to finish the level. Some sort of random data or code inside the program ends up getting used for what you see on the screen.
So there is no God because. There is no God because. There is no God because. There is no God because.
Guys.
A follow-up question with the other person to respond, and then something along those lines, or
it can just be free form, as long as you can just make sure we don't overtalk. That's fine. I don't have to be like fine.
Yes, this is the one. This one I actually saw first. I saw most of this one first. This one gets a little heated. So this one's part two. I'm taking that to mean that this did happen after the one I've been reviewing. So yeah, probably tomorrow I will probably continue on this in the morning, get good and caffeinated after breakfast, and get into these. I don't know how long I'll push into them, but at least finish up this part one, and then I definitely want to get into that one because the second one is a gold mine. JRobin loses it a couple of times. Really does not conduct himself well, which isn't surprising. But it's been a little over 2 hours, and I need to wrap this up. I can't keep going. But what I am going to do, because Michael Fredgren is still here, I'm going to post the join link here, and then I'm going to sign off if anybody wants to jump in here. Michael was starting to share like a little analysis that he had of JRobin's argument, and I did want to hear that, so I'm going to post that here in the chat. I'm not going to bring in too many people because I'm not going to stay on for that long, but I wanted to give him a chance to. I wanted to talk to him about that, but I think we can probably do that off air. It's probably a little easier. I'll pin that, and so yeah. If anybody wants to jump in, and Michael, if you're out of time or you can't do it or whatever, that's okay too. Just let me know in the chat if you. Need to. Rants slow you down, Jefferson. Yeah, they do. Yeah, but that's kind of, I guess that's kind of the point of my channel, though, is to rant about this stuff. So anyway, that's up. Yes, like and subscribe. Thanks, AJ. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you for keeping the live chat interesting. You guys are always great. I'm going to sign off now, and I will see you guys all probably tomorrow morning. Well, obviously some of you aren't going to be around live, but I'll be back on here then. And yeah, take it easy. Take care of yourselves. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. Later.